the state. I mean, it's and you know, this toxic air, Zaka, which you and I are breathing, it's the same air that these extraordinary individuals are breathing too. It's the same air that we are breathing. You can put a million air purifiers in the room, but the ordinary and the extraordinary of Delhi, millions of us are breathing this, and 12 years of our life has already been slashed because of this toxic air.
So, Devadatya, I mean, it comes back to everybody has the solutions. You know, the Chief Minister talked a couple of years ago about how there is this chemical that the Pusa Institute has found. It just costs 5,000 rupees. You put that chemical, the parali will automatically disintegrate. Governments have talked about these deep cutter machines, which will be made available on a community sharing basis at 5,000 rupees. Again, no one even knows how many such machines have been deployed. Now the latest we've heard is this particular variety of rice that's grown in Punjab. It needs to be changed and it can be easily changed. But point is, everybody knows what the solution to the problem is. And I think Smita is 100% right. Nobody wants to touch the farmers because farmers are a vote bank. You touch them, you will feel the impact of it in the next election. Like even Mr. Modi had to walk back on the farm laws. Why? Not because, he didn't believe in the laws. He had to walk back because farmers are a constituency. They are a vote bank. They will cost you elections. That is why nobody wants to touch the farmers. That is why nobody wants to touch the parali burning issue, because there's a political cost to pay. Whereas poor middle class Delhiites, let them breathe bad air for a month. They will whine and they will cry and they will outrage on Twitter. But uske baad, once it rains or once the winds pick up speed, the atmosphere will clear up and then everybody will get on with their lives. That's the reality. Devadatya.
Yeah, Zaka, thank you. You are right that no one wants to be accountable to the issue. But I just want to say one thing, like it is not about if it is only parali or if it is only firecrackers, because see, the parali burning has been there. We all know this problem exists. Same I can say about the vehicles. See, there is a IIT Kanpur report 5-6 years ago came, this issue became hyped up. And the IIT Kanpur report clearly said in winter, vehicle pollution and the secondary particle matters are the consistent source. And there is a variable source, which includes biomass burning like parali and also firecrackers. Now, you show the data in the beginning of the show. In last 3-4 days, the AQI was near about 300 to 400 around there. And there was rain also. What happened in one night? Like, the AQI shooted to 900. Did the farmers burn 3 times, 4 times more parali in just one day? Do you want to say that? I don't want to go into that argument. What I'm saying is that we have to understand our own accountability. Delhi government must bring a policy to limit the vehicles. This is the one thing which Delhi government can do. Same applies for NCR, because see, air pollution, you cannot control air pollution having political boundaries. You have to think air shade. Because air, air doesn't, like Delhi's air will not travel to Punjab, Punjab's will not travel to Haryana. It's not like that. So we have to be a little bit scientific. We have to keep our political egos aside, because see, there are lives at stake.
But just on that vehicular movement point, I just want to clarify this for our viewers, because I think Delhi implemented odd even twice, if I'm not mistaken, once in 2016, once in the last one in 2019. And whatever studies have been done to assess the impact of it have not shown conclusively that worked. So when you say restrict vehicular movement, there has to be, again, scientific backing to show that, yes, that does lead to a change of air quality, which at least in the last 2 instances, it did not show conclusively.
Agree. So I'm saying that, except the first ordinance policy, it was complete failure because there were exemptions which were added later on. Yes. What I'm saying is we have to limit the number of vehicles in Delhi. I'm not saying for particular days. Like, one family have 4 to 5 cars. We're not investing on the public transportation, like buses. Metros, even the metros has the problem of last mile connectivity. If my house is 5 kilometers away from metro, then again I have to book a auto, Uber. It doesn't matter whether my own car or book a Uber. Yeah. The fact is the vehicle is still there. So we have to think we have to be a little bit rationalized. I know we have to bring some policies which can at least maybe by putting higher taxes on families owning more than 1 or 2 cars, something like that. Otherwise, if you see the data of the vehicles being added to Delhi, it's humongous. In last 5-6 years, the number of vehicles has just shooted up. So
no, I asked this to the AAP spokespersons last week also on the show, right? All you need to do is to say that electric vehicles, people who are going to give up their existing cars, petrol cars or diesel cars, old cars, in lieu of electric vehicles, you just say that the Delhi government will get you zero interest loans for it. That's it. People will switch to electric vehicles.
We do actually. Delhi has the highest subsidy. Delhi has the highest subsidy, Zaka.
So then why aren't people
you're right,
switching to
and
electric
that is
vehicles?
actually this conversation.
Why are people holding on to 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old cars?
No, because it's not perhaps subsidy enough for everyone, but there is a segment that is slowly moving towards electric vehicle. Look, the environmentalist on the panel has actually, brought some important points on the table, and I think that is a more constructive way of having a dialogue about this, and leaving, including me, I think politics aside, what he is saying there are 2-3 important points. One is that we have to look at long-term measures. Unlike what Ms. Prakash was saying, actually it is important to look at long-term measures, because all this, whether it is parali burning, whether it is pollution caused of vehicular traffic and so on, these are not things that have happened overnight. These things have happened because there was a lack of planning. And which is why it's critical for us to now think for the future. But ma'am, you've been in power for 9 years. And which is why all these
not
steps,
9 months. You've been in power for 9 years.
Well, and I can. And Delhi perhaps is the only state that can count and tell you the steps that it has been taken. Is there anything from, do we hear anything about Haryana? Have they stopped diesel buses that also come into Delhi, by the way? And like the environmentalist here was saying that, unlike our political, divisions, the region does not, the geography of this area does not understand that. So if the vehicles from Haryana and UP that are diesel vehicle in 2023 are on the road, whereas that you don't see in Delhi, I mean in terms of heavy vehicle.
Okay.
Or if they are improving their public transport or not. So there are a lot of, if we are going to have a
Basuri Suraj, respond. Why? I mean, ultimately the Supreme Court order applies to the entire National Capital Region. She's saying that, there are diesel buses, polluting buses of Haryana Transport Corporation, UP Transport Corporation, which are all freely going into and out of Delhi. That's causing a problem. Trucks are going into and out of Delhi, registered in other states. Uber and Ola, diesel cars, Uber and Ola cars registered in other states are going into and out of Delhi. Nobody is stopping all of this. And these states, you are in power. Aam Aadmi Party is not in power.
Thank you, Zaka. Let me first respond on the traffic aspect. This is a matter of record that the Eastern Peripheral Expressway as well as the Western Peripheral Expressway were constructed and inaugurated by the central government so that unnecessary heavy vehicular traffic does not enter Delhi, it circumvents the city. So therefore, that is your answer to vehicular traffic. Now, regarding every time the Aam Aadmi Party government has this sort of last-minute meeting on what needs to be done on pollution, they come up with this visionless policy of odd and even. It is the Supreme Court of India that says that odd and even is nothing but optics. I must go on to say that's even a gimmick which only causes inconvenience to Delhiites. The major issue is parali. The Supreme Court recognizes it. They say that it is the major contributor to the pollution, and it is the Honorable Chief Minister, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, he himself has gone on record and said in 2018 and then repeated it later, saying that it is parali and that too Punjab parali. Whatever happens in Punjab, these are Mr. Kejriwal's words, not mine, where he says that majority of the parali burning incidents happen in Punjab, a minuscule one happens in Haryana. And once again, I'm just going to put this on the screen because they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Just see, this entire state of Punjab on the 5th of November is red. I just want to ask you, they keep asking us what is the, Smita ji was also raising this point about a sort of a coordination between the center and the state. Since 2018, Zaka, 1,426.41 crore rupees have been given by center just to Punjab government alone to have procurement of crop residue management machines. I want to know what happened. You raised the point about the biodecomposer, correct? Yep. 68 lakh rupees were actually spent on procurement of that biodecomposer chemical. Zaka, you will be shocked. 23 crore rupees was spent on the advertisement budget of that product, which costed 68 lakhs. I want to ask the Aam Aadmi Party, is this not disproportionate? Is this not imprudent? Why have you not spent that 23 crore rupees on procurement and the implementation of that particular chemical? And again, I am not conjecturing these figures and bringing them out of mid-air. There is an RTI which was filed by our honorable leader of opposition in January 2022, and it said that 2 years, from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, 68 lakh rupees was spent on the biodecomposer and 23 crore rupees was spent on its advertisement.
Abhinandita, respond to that.
First thing first, 2 smoke towers, for the benefit of our viewers, 2 smoke towers were installed in Delhi, one by the Aam Aadmi Party government and the other by the central government. Both lie defunct at the moment. A lot of fanfare ke saath, they even inaugurated the one in Anand Vihar by the central government. Can I ask Basuri ji what happened to that? Number 2, she's been going on and on about what the Aam Aadmi Party government has done or not done. Can you tell us one meeting held by the Environment Minister of the government? If you've had 9 years to think that, okay, we are good for nothing, and you fight cases, in the Supreme Court to take away all the powers from an elected government, what are the steps that you have taken in these 9 years? By now, you must have figured that, this government is incompetent to handle a problem. Then what does it take for the Environment Minister of the Centre to bring together the chief ministers of all the concerned states on one table and find a solution? So this politicking can go on, and it's very shameful that it's just reaching a really lowly level after last night. And my request to the BJP spokesperson here is that we must find a solution collectively. There is a lot of worth in investing in long-term measures. There's a lot of the law implementing agencies must act at the same time. And we must tell something to the people, the children who are dying, and the children who are choking.
The final word. I have to wrap up. Again, I'm all for coordinated meetings, and yes, I think somebody pointed this out on Twitter. The Union Environment Minister is campaigning in Madhya Pradesh. I think he's the campaign in charge there. Surely questions need to be asked as to why. I mean, is a campaign more important than the lives of Delhiites? But alternatively, questions can also be asked that,
that's an unfair statement. That's an unfair statement. That way Kejriwal was campaigning.
Yeah, of course he was. But of course he was. He should also be here. I mean, has he called the Environment Minister of Delhi and the Environment Minister of Punjab? He doesn't need the centre's permission to call the Environment Ministers of Punjab and Delhi states that the Aam Aadmi Party rules. And you shouldn't be doing these meetings in November after the problem. You should be doing these meetings in September before the problem. But anyway, Smita, final word. Look, honestly, yeah. I've been here now in Delhi for the last 9 years. And this problem has been there for the last 9 years in varying forms and shapes. Yes, during COVID, it's sort of subsided. But it's been going on and on. And frankly, I don't think this problem is going to get solved for the next 9 years. I mean, and it's not like Delhi is the first city in the world to face this problem. Los Angeles faced this, London faced this, Beijing faced this. If they can fix it, why can't we?
Well, meetings is not the solution. That's all we've heard so far in the show, that you should call a meeting. Why should you call a meeting? You rightfully pointed out that if the meetings were to be called out, they should have been called for in August or September, much before the Parali burning happened. And by then, the distribution of all the, whether the crop, the cutting thing or whatever, it should have been done earlier. Now is not the time to call a meeting. Now is not the time to say, oh, we want to do seeding for clouds and stuff like that, and then we are taking permission. We have moved a file. No, this is not the time. It's already too late for this year. And this is going to happen next year. We have very short memories. And Zaka, you're absolutely right that this is something that happens year after year. And if you schools closed, construction activities stopped, all kinds of problems. And if you have family which have respiratory problems at home, and most of us do, somebody or the other has a respiratory illness. And if not, then you have young children or older parents living in the home with you. And it is detrimental to them. And it's not, we can't just leave it to the our netas, because apparently it's not important enough for them. They have air purifiers, they have water purifiers, they have everything going for them. It is we who have to suffer. And as citizens, it's detrimental to our health, and it is our duty as citizens, and we are not doing our duty towards our young, towards our old, if we are not providing them the basics, which is air and water. If we can't provide them clean air and clean water, what are we doing as citizens for ourselves and our futures and future of our citizens?
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, the fact that, and this is as per the latest medical studies, the fact that an average Delhiite loses 10 to 12 years just because he or she happens to be living in the national capital and breathing this toxic air. I mean, if that doesn't wake up our collective consciousness, I don't know what will. But anyway, thank you very much to our guests. We'll see how the story plays out for the rest of this season. Like I said, the Parali burning will continue for another few more days. And hopefully after that, let's all pray to the weather gods for it to either rain or the wind speeds to pick up, because that seems to be the only solution that we have in hand right now. Quick break. When we come back on the other side, it's been over a month since the Israel-Hamas war began. I'll be speaking to Fareed Zakaria, CNN commentator, on where this war stands. More importantly, where is this headed? What is the end game here, both for Israel and what happens the day after the war? And today, very big developments in the UK as well. The Home Secretary of UK got sacked. The former Prime Minister, David Cameron, has been brought back to government as the new Foreign Secretary. What may all of this mean? All that and more right on the other side of this quick break.
Hello, Moto.
RP Sanjeev Goenka Group presents CNN News 18 Indian of the Year 2023. And the nominees for the entertainment category are Shah Rukh Khan, Mani Ratnam, Sunny Deol, Deepika Padukone, Manoj Bajpayee. Vote now on www.indianoftheyear.com and choose the Indians conquering the world.
A 5-year-old. Where?
You can see the amount of blood. This was a massacre.
This is one of the paragliders that flew in here. You can see the engine here. More than 200 plus hostages are untraced.
Just the sheer brutality of what we have witnessed in Israel as part of these Hamas attacks.
Concerns are seriously being raised that is there a larger game at play.
This is not merely a retaliation by Israel. This is an operation to try and prevent the status quo that existed before.
What's happening on the very early? I've entered Palestine.
Likely to pick up, and these pollutants would yet again be washed away, and that is the only silver lining for the people out here in the national capital. But remember, over the next few days as well, the AQI is likely to remain in the poor to very poor category, and in fact is likely to deteriorate yet again in the severe category as well because of the wind directions. Now what remains to be seen is to what new plans can the Delhi government and the Delhi administration make sure that they initially make, and make sure that is implemented on the ground to the T, so that some sort of immediate relief can be provided to the people out here in the national capital who have been suffering from this deteriorating air quality for at least the last 10 days. Currently I am reporting from the pollution hotspot out here in the national capital, that is the Anand Vihar bus terminal, and if I could just show you in the visuals around here, the visibility is not as bad as it was expected. The AQI out here in the national capital remains to be in the very poor category, although the measures of GRAP 4 has been implemented. But yes, the manner in which the order of the Supreme Court of not bursting crackers was flouted by several people out here in the national capital. That has made sure that the AQI deteriorates yet again. But if you compare the AQI that is today, the very next day, post Diwali, with the yesteryears, you can actually see that the AQI is not as bad as it was expected, and in fact, it has somewhere or the other being better than what it was last year at this time around. Also, what we have seen that yes, there were several people who had flouted the norms and had gone ahead and busted crackers through the night on the day of Diwali. But yes, today the AQI has definitely deteriorated, but it is not as bad as it can be seen. On the other hand, we have seen a lot of politics that has already started to happen in this entire matter. The opposition leaders are already coming on record and putting blame on the BJP leaders because they were the people who instigated people to go ahead and burst these crackers. So yes, the political blame game has already started. But if you speak about the AQI has definitely deteriorated post-Diwali, but it is not as bad as it was over the last many years right after the day of Diwali. Currently, I am reporting from Akshardham temple, where I could just show you in the visuals around here that yet again today cloud of smog has yet again engulfed the national capital. Remember, over the weekend we saw that there were spells of rain, which meant that the AQI in the national capital had improved significantly. But post Diwali, yet again we are seeing that the AQI in the national capital has yet again deteriorated. The main reason behind this is being said to be the manner in which the norms were flouted by the residents of the national capital even after the orders of the Supreme Court, which meant that there was a blanket ban on bursting of any sort of crackers. That was flouted significantly out here in the national capital, and that is the reason why we are seeing that the AQI out here has yet again deteriorated. Over the next few days, the IMD predicts that the AQI might improve due to the wind conditions, but if you look at the longer run over the next 1 week, the AQI is yet again going to get back into the severe category.
So it's been over a month since the Israel-Hamas war began. Over 1,400 Israelis have died in the terror attack that happened on the 7th of October. There are still over 200 hostages. In response, Israel has launched a massive air and ground operations in which the Ministry of Health in Gaza says over 10,000 Palestinians have died. Where is this war headed? Are we likely to see any kind of an end game here from Israel's side? And what kind of impact is it having around the world, particularly in Western societies? We're seeing both pro-Palestinian protests in large numbers and also pro-Israel protests in large numbers. Joining me now is one of the leading foreign policy voices in the world, international affairs commentator and the anchor of Fareed Zakaria GPS on CNN. Fareed Zakaria, thank you for speaking with us here on CNN News 18.
Good to talk to you, Zaka.
So let me start off by asking you, it's been over a month now since this war began between Israel and Hamas. I just listed out the casualties on both sides. What is your assessment of where things stand right now? And do you see any end in the near term to this, or is this going to be a long war?
I think this is going to be longer than most people would have hoped or wanted, because the Israelis have decided that they really need to do something much more fundamental than they have done in the past. You know, they've had, I think, 5 previous military incursions into Gaza, mostly through aerial bombardment. But this time they've decided they cannot live with a Hamas-ruled Gaza, which means you have to really go in and root it out in a very complicated, grueling battle where you're going in urban warfare, you know, house to house and things like that. The United States did this in Mosul. This is the closest analogy I can think of in Iraq, and it took 9 months. Now, I don't think it'll take quite that long because the Israeli army is massive and powerful, and right next door, the U.S. was, had only sent 150,000 troops to Iraq. But it tells you, just how complicated the operation is. And there's one additional factor. The reason the Israelis are using this massive bombardment and even the massive artillery fire, which is leveling whole blocks of the city of Gaza, is, of course, they're trying to minimize casualties of Israeli soldiers. So if you think about it, when you're confronting the possibility of tunnels around hospitals or whatever it is, there would be a way to go in without destroying the entire neighborhood, which would be to send Israeli troops into those tunnels. But of course, that would presumably cause a much, much greater danger to Israeli troops. So, and this is the same dilemma the US faced in Iraq. So, how much do you bomb and how much are you willing to live with the civilian casualties that are the result? And this is the calculation that is going to take place in each of these places. So I suspect this is going to be a long, bloody struggle, and we're only in the middle of it.
But as the civilian casualties mount, and the Ministry of Health in Gaza is saying over 10,000 have died, a large number of them happen to be women and children. As the civilian casualties mount in the Gaza Strip, how much pressure is there going to be on Israel? Even with the Biden administration, how much pressure is the Biden administration facing? We've seen these, pro-Palestinian protests, and we've seen even Jewish groups in America protest against what they feel is some kind of a blank check given by the Biden administration to the Israeli government. At what point do those words translate into action in a way that Israel has to say, okay, we now have to respond to this international pressure?
When Israel has felt as threatened as it does now, very little international pressure in the past has mattered. First of all, the only pressure that matters is the pressure from Washington. Israel has kind of gotten used to the idea that it will be overwhelmingly outvoted in the UN. I think if you look at the UN General Assembly votes, it has been, 5 to 10 countries voting with Israel. Everyone else, 170 countries voting against. But the only country that matters in this situation is the United States. The Biden administration has adopted a strategy where they are trying to be very supportive of Israel, particularly publicly, and privately caution them and warn them and rein them in. I would say, honestly, so far it has not worked. Because the Bibi Netanyahu has pocketed the support and is defying any kind of pressure. And he's banking on the idea that at a moment like this, with Israel feeling as vulnerable, that the Biden administration will not apply real pressure, will not publicly break with them. And that's probably a reasonable bet. The Biden administration counseled them not to even do a ground invasion, to do a more targeted set of incursions that would go after specific terrorists. They've cautioned them not to do the siege. I mean, I think the most questionable part of Israel's strategy here is they have laid siege to Gaza. No food, no electricity, no water, no medicines for 2.2 million people. Now, whatever you may think about hunting out the 30 or 40,000 Hamas militants, to lay siege to an entire population does seem very close to collective punishment. And the Biden administration counseled against that. We're not able to get anywhere. As I say, Israel is feeling a kind of existential threat. And when you feel as threatened as that, you tend to lash out. You tend not to listen to others. That's where they are now. I don't think the Biden administration has any plans to massively ramp up the pressure, but they have certainly been making it known that their views are not their views are in divergence with those of the Netanyahu government.
And across the Atlantic, we're seeing a bit of a political fallout, if you will. Maybe not directly, but certainly indirectly because of this war. Suella Braverman, who used to be the UK Home Secretary, she's been sacked. We now have the former British Prime Minister David Cameron back in government after 7 years as the new Foreign Secretary of Britain. How do you weigh in on these changes?
I think this is, as you say, indirectly a result of all this, but there was always a split within the Tory party between Rishi Sunak, who is seen as a kind of more moderate technocratic figure, and the hard right, and Suella Braverman really representing that hard right. So I suspect that while Rishi Sunak has done, what you have to do as Prime Minister, you cannot have a member of your cabinet openly defying you. I suspect Braverman is not so unhappy about this because her strategy presumably will be to let Rishi Sunak lead the party in the next elections, lose in that election, and then mount a challenge to him as the true Tory, the true conservative, the hardline figure. And this was a convenient issue on which to break. It was kind of a silly issue, and she's frankly, I think, in the wrong here. The issue was whether or not to allow a demonstration. I mean, Britain is the mother of parliaments. It is the home of one of the oldest democracies in the world. Freedom of speech and association are widely protected. Of course, you don't want that to turn into intimidation and violence, but the argument that you can ban a demonstration that hundreds of thousands of people wanted to take part in feels more like being in an authoritarian country. You ban demonstrations in Russia, you don't ban them in Britain.
And the appointment of David Cameron now as Foreign Secretary, you say it'll be a more balanced, perhaps a more centrist sort of approach, and clearly he's a weighty voice, and the world could do with more voices of heft, one would imagine, particularly as we have two wars happening almost in parallel.
Yeah, David Cameron is a smart guy. He's a wise person. He's also mellowed, I think, but he was always a moderate. Remember, he was against Brexit, and that's why he lost his prime ministership. But the truth of the matter is, even Britain, which is probably after the United States, the second country that Israel would pay attention to, it doesn't have that much influence. Britain has become a minor player on the world stage, particularly after Brexit. Great Britain has turned into Little England, because without the association with Europe, it is it's a medium-sized power. It doesn't really have that much heft on its own, and it has severed the connection with Europe. So it's not clear whether David Cameron can reverse any of that just because of the sheer weight of his personality. I doubt it very much. I think Britain is now playing in the little leagues of international relations.
I want to focus just for a moment on the kind of backlash we're seeing from both sides to this war in Western societies, in Western cities, in London, in Paris, in New York, in American university campuses. You're seeing both pro-Palestinian protesters out, and you're also seeing pro-Israel protesters out, and many are also saying that some of the anti-Semitic stuff that you're seeing is probably the highest that we've seen since the Holocaust. What is the impact this has had? And it's getting sort of mixed up in immigration politics, in the culture wars. How is this sort of playing out in Western societies, on both sides of the Atlantic, as it were?
I think you're right, Zaka. It's more heated than I can remember at any point in certainly several decades, and I think that has to do with the fact that there is a newer, younger group of voters and participants in the Western world who are more diverse, more multicultural, and don't instinctively support Israel as their older cohorts would have. Now, I think that some of that is the Israeli policies over the last several decades. And it's important to really make a distinction here. You have had, for the last 20 years roughly, right-wing governments in Israel that have expanded settlements, confiscated land from Palestinians, jailed Palestinians. There has been settler violence against Palestinians that has gone unchecked. You have had a 16-year blockade of Gaza. And a certain amount of the anti-Israel protesting is really anti these right-wing government policies in Israel. If you go back 20 years when the left was in power in Israel and they were trying to negotiate two-state solutions, I think that was a very different Israel in a sense. So some of it is directed not at the existence of Israel, but at those policies. But there is some that morphs into a kind of broader anti-Zionism and a broader anti-Israelism, which also sometimes morphs into anti-Semitism, and that is appalling and should be condemned. But I do think it's important to make that distinction between opposing specific policies of specific governments in Israel and, opposing the existence of Israel, or even worse, talking about the excessive power of Jews and things like that, which are, of course, age-old tropes and conspiracy theories that people have had forever. But all of it is coming kind of mixing together and is producing a pretty powerful set of controversies in the United States, in Britain, in much of Europe.
So let me end by coming back to where I started. Right now, there is this intense war that's going on. It doesn't seem like Israel is going to relent anytime soon. But what happens 3 months from now? What happens 6 months from now? At what point does Israel say, okay, we have achieved whatever military objective we started out at the beginning of this war? And what happens the day after the war? I mean, what replaces Hamas, for example?
These are very good questions, Zaka, and unfortunately, so far, listening to Israeli officials, you don't get the sense that they have thought this through very well. So to begin with, what would constitute success? It's not clear, because you can root out Hamas in certain neighborhoods and go into some tunnels and get them out, but then are you sure they're now nowhere else? Are you sure the leaders haven't crossed the border into Egypt, into Lebanon? Nobody knows for sure. So there will have to be some judgment used at some point to say, we are now sure that we have gotten most of the military hardware and architecture out. But then, as you say, the real question is, what happens then? What the United States learned in Iraq and Afghanistan is, once you destroy the existing authority, the problem becomes you need to replace it with some kind of authority, and that authority will be challenged. So the issue is not just whom do you put in place to rule Gaza, but the issue is, whom do you put in place in Gaza who will be able to withstand the inevitable challenges to its authority? Let's say you put in place, the Palestinian Authority, as people are often talking about. Well, there will be terror attacks against the Palestinian Authority launched by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. You put in the Arab League or an Arab coalition of Arab states, same thing. You put in the UN. The United States tried doing the UN in Iraq, and the first bombings were of UN headquarters, killing dozens, including the leader of that mission. So how do you manage to achieve stability and order? I suspect that Israel is going to have to effectively reoccupy Gaza for some extended period of time, which will be a very time-consuming and taxing enterprise, and will involve more civilian casualties, and will degrade Israel's legitimacy in the world even more. They really have not thought this through, and I think that the prospect of a kind of clean and easy victory is not very high.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Fareed Zakaria. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for your time and for your insights.
Good to talk to you, Zach.
That it is yet again going to be a troublesome time for the people out here in the National Capital Region, where yet again they would be forced to breathe in the toxic air. Now what remains to be seen is to what new arrangements or schemes can be made by the government to make sure that the AQI remains under breathable levels, because over the past 1 week we have seen that the AQI had deteriorated, which meant that there were a lot of health issues that people